article started talking about the hit dates when they could actually happen. And when you get out like another 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, then it starts getting a higher percentage where one of them might actually hit. And could you imagine how much damage would happen if the size of the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, hit us?
Phew, boy, that and then if it hit in a certain area like the super volcano or a big fault line, it could trigger and act as a catalyst to even more disaster. So, yeah, that is scary stuff. And another thing that people don't maybe not think about is when they're out there in space, other asteroids could bounce off of them and knock them in, toward our course or our gravitational. Something could always move it closer to us at a sooner date. And these are scary scenarios.
It is. Now, we're going to go on break. We'll be back in 2.5 minutes. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
And that is me. I hope everybody's having a great evening. I can't wait to our guest to be on here in about a half an hour. James, I'll tell you, abductions, UFO sightings, they just don't go away. And it seems like it keeps getting more and more. But then, right now, you're not really hearing much about it on the news because what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now.
Right, the old distraction. There's probably a lot going on, but they try to distract you with the wall impeachment or changes. Or there's always something to distract you away from other things, so to speak.
Oh, yeah. Now, in 2000 of September 27th, 4 deer hunters were experienced hunters and outdoorsmen watched a UFO, huge one, triangular shape, pass over their campsite and stop, and then took off.
Wow. That almost reminds me of the story that happened, I think, in September. It was in Taos, New Mexico, where the hunters, they actually seen aliens on the ground. And we talked about that before, that it seems like reports of people seeing aliens on the ground has kind of risen also.
Oh, yeah, it has. And then January 26, 2002, a patrol officer, a police officer, who was working radar, noticed an unlit object, disc-shaped object, move across the highway really slow. He points his radar gun at the object, but he gets no return. And then the object disappears.
Wow. That, I kind of wonder, that could maybe, who's to say it wasn't one of our secret military ships that maybe they were taking them for a test run. Who knows? But it's going to be stealthy, and it probably wouldn't have a return on it. But I'm sure alien ship wouldn't either, so who knows?
Yeah, but why would they go right across the main road, at treetop height and just kind of go slow? If we're trying to test equipment, right, they certainly wouldn't go in a populated area and then go that low for people could stare at it.
You wouldn't think so, but maybe they would just think, hey, people are just going to think it's a UFO, and we'll just let them go with it. It's hard to think. Who knows what they're thinking? But I agree with you. I wouldn't do it like that either.
Well, then, and guess in 2004 of March 25th, a crew of an airliner reported seeing a disc-shaped object, which remained visible for 10 to 15 minutes following the airliner. And yes, a FAA report was filed, and it also was picked up by an FAA radar during the whole sighting. So it was something there following that aircraft.
Wow, there was a lot of people there taking reports. I wonder if the pilot came forward with a lot of reports on that, or wonder how he approached that.
Well, a lot of people on the plane saw it out their window.
Yeah, I know a lot of things have changed towards the outlook of that. Because how they used to frown on pilots reporting anything anymore, but I think they kind of lighten up on that. I think they kind of want them to report maybe something.
No, if you're filing commercially, in fact, I talked to a pilot here on Thursday who's going to be on my show later this month about a sighting. If you report it, you're flying for any of the airlines and you report a UFO, kiss your job goodbye. It's gone.
Okay.
It's only the Navy it's now taking reports for some reason. It's not commercial airline companies.
Okay, so if you're flying for one of the big companies, you best not say nothing.
Well, I guess maybe if you go to the bar afterwards and tell your friend, but you certainly wouldn't want to report it to your employer if you want to keep your job flying.
Right. Well, remember the report, I think it was back in 1988, it was in Alaska, matter of fact, the Japanese commercial flight, when they seen that giant UFO. And he reported, and he had a heck of a time getting his job back, I think.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the amount of reports. Okay, Arizona had, like, for example, in the last 10 years, 4,021 reports. British Columbia had 1,050. California had 13,811 reports. Colorado had 2,560. Connecticut had 1,616 reports of UFOs. For some reason, the District of Columbia only had 137. Delaware had 325. Well, Florida had 6,727. Georgia, 2,200. Hawaii had 557 reports of UFOs. Kansas had 972. Kentucky had almost 1,400. In British Columbia had 1,521. And it goes on and on. Montana had 851. Newfoundland, Canada had 41. New York had 4,814. Ohio had 3,600. Oklahoma had 2,896 reports of UFOs. South Carolina had 1,868. Tennessee, 1,902. Utah had 1,231. Washington State had 6,037. Wisconsin, 2,051. West Virginia, 751. Yukon Territory had 234. And Wyoming had 334. So, that's and Utah. Let's see how many Utah had a total of 1,231.
Yeah, and Washington had 5,000 or 6,000 and some. I think that was the most, and that's a lot of sightings.
Oh yeah, it makes you wonder what all these sightings. Why Washington, for example, and but then you go to some of these states, like they don't have hardly any.
I know it's mystifying. It truly is. Hey, I just seen a report just came up here. Do you remember Canada's Shag Harbor incident? October 4th marked 52 years ago that happened.
Oh, so what was the report? What was it about?
Well, what happened? Several people had seen what they thought was a UFO over the harbor, and then they thought it was a plane crash. They thought it crashed into the harbor and it went underneath the water. Well, they went out there and searched for wreckage and survivors. There was nothing. And then the Navy got involved, and they were there for a couple of days, and there was like glowing stuff on the water and underneath the water, and they closed it all off, and they think it was a crash and a retrieval type thing underneath the water with a UFO, and that was called the Shag Harbor UFO mystery. And it marked 52 years on the 4th that happened. And it was kind of a hush, they tried to hush it up because a lot of people, the locals thought maybe, there was an airplane crash. And here it was basically a UFO.
Yeah. And I wonder how many UFOs are crashed or buried in Antarctica. Or just, again, one day we were talking about time. Time really doesn't exist. We put our own time on because of the way the Earth rotates. There's 24 hours it takes for the Earth to rotate, give or take a few microseconds. But could you imagine maybe from another solar system, another planet, which is like 10 times the size of Earth, how many times does it have to rotate? And maybe their life is 10 times longer or more. Think about some of these UFOs maybe just sitting dormant, just waiting in the ocean or Antarctica or some other, interesting places, just waiting to take over. Waiting maybe because maybe their planet is endowed in water. And they're just waiting for that to happen with us. Because I'll tell you, when Antarctica is all melted through, I'll tell you, the sea level is going to be quite a bit higher. So, it's going to be like California is going to be underwater. It's going to be a lot of places underwater. Florida, number one. Don't buy any property.
Yeah, and all of the southern beach states like Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, they're all going to be in trouble because it's basically underwater now. Below sea level. And like you said, when those melt, them caps, and we've talked about it. God knows what has been laying dormant under there for thousands of years. And that would be one way it's going to get traversed clear across the world, the world, through water. And if there's something that's going to kill an epidemic or whatever, well, there's a good way for it to get out there.
I don't know. It just, everybody speculates because we don't know anything about aliens. We don't know really anything about abductions other than what people claim. Am I correct? So you have
Absolutely.
to rely on what Calvin Parker says or Timothy Cullen or Joe Blow or, Dave Edmonds or any of these other people, what they said about, being abducted. We can only go by what they have told us. And that, if we go by what they tell us, they're not friendly towards humans. I'm sorry. And that's the scary part, James, that I think there's agenda out there. And I think the government knows it. And I think that's why all this distraction is going on. Have you noticed that of any president in his term, it's been so much distraction going on? Right from the start, the trade tariffs, building the wall, the Middle East, Russia, Clinton being thrown into it. It's keep your mind off of maybe what's going on out there.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's always something to distract, or to bait and switch you, to get your attention the other way. There's so much going, and what really kind of makes this complicated too is if